Welcome back to Historical Context. Today we are continuing our Middle Colony series, the colonization of the Middle Colonies. Today we pick up where we left off several weeks ago when we talked about New Netherland. We return today at the end of 1629 after Governor Peter Minuit purchased Manhattan Island from the natives. Peter Minuit did not stop with just Manhattan Island. In July of 1630, he purchased Ellis Island, which would later be a late 18th, early 19th century immigration hub. As for Staten Island, its rights are transferred from the Dutch West India Company to a Michael Paul in August of 1630. Paul also tried to establish a colony where modern-day Jersey City is located, but failed to meet the 50-person condition that the Dutch had established and had to surrender his colony in 1633. 1630 was a good trade year for New Netherland as the colony exported 10% more goods than it imported. In June 1631, Samuel Goodwin, an officer in the Dutch West India Company, was given the privilege by the company to settle a colony on the west side of the Delaware Bay. A group of 28, led by David de Vries, settled the area and even built a fort. Unfortunately, a fight broke out between the colonists and the local natives, and almost every colonist was killed. De Vries was not there at the time and did not return until next December, only to find the bones of the settlers scattered about and the fort burned to the ground. So it looks like David de Vries and Christopher Columbus had something in common. At the end of 1631, Peter Minuit was called back to the Netherlands, thus ending a rather successful tenure as the third director of New Amsterdam. He was replaced by Sebastian Krol. Krol would have an uneventful year as director and would be replaced in 1633 by Wouter van Twiller. Van Twiller's directorship would be more eventful. His first purchase as director later in 1633 would be an area of land that would later become Hartford, Connecticut. And if you've been following the podcast, you notice that New Netherland and New England are starting to get a little closer and closer together. Connecticut would become a disputed territory between New Netherland and New England, leading Van Twiller to engage with John Winthrop over this issue in late 1633. In 1635, Pietro Alberti would immigrate to New Netherland. His travel was significant because he is the first known Italian to move to the New World. Pietro Alberti. In 1636, Van Twiller would purchase Long Island from the natives. The day after Long Island is purchased, a lieutenant of Van Twiller's, Jacob von Corlear, and two other men buy land at what would later become Brooklyn. Later that year, Van Twiller gifts Staten Island to Captain de Vries. Van Twiller was seen as someone who looked out for his own interest over those of the colonies. Accused of mismanagement, he was recalled back to the Netherlands in late 1637 and replaced by Willem Kieft. Kieft's tenure as governor would bring many firsts, worthy of their own short episode, I guess, but 1638 brings a new entrant to the region, so a new group of people come to New Netherland. Led by none other than former director Peter Minuit, a group of Swedes enters the area to establish a Swedish colony. While Swedish colonization may sound like a shock to some of you in the podcast, in the 17th century, it was not unexpected. Sweden had a rather powerful military, and its country had been sending traders to the New Netherland region going as far back as 1610. In 1626, the Swedish South Company was formed to establish colonies between Florida and Newfoundland for the purposes of trading. So they did much like the English, and to some extent the Dutch, in forming their own company to handle trade and colonization. It would take 11 years to put together an expedition, but one left in late 1637 and eventually found its way up the Delaware River to modern-day Wilmington. The Swedes built a fort there named Fort Christina, named after their monarch, and the first governor of the Swedish colony was Peter Minuit. So if you're ever on Jeopardy and you're asked about an individual who served as a colonial governor in a colony of two different nationalities, Peter Minuit is your guy. Despite Minuit's Dutch background, director Willem Kieft is not pleased with the Swedes being in the area, and he sends a letter to New Sweden reminding them that the whole area belongs to New Netherland. Sadly, while on a trade expedition in St. Kitts, a hurricane sank Minuit's ship, claiming his life and all those on board. Mans Kling was named governor of the colony until a replacement would arrive in 1640. New Netherland and New Sweden were not quite on top of each other geographically, but they were definitely neighbors. We'll have to see how this relationship unfolds in future episodes. Now, the Swedes being in the New World may seem insignificant or a footnote or a small point of interest, but in June of 1639, Fort Christina would become home to the first of an old-time American tradition, and that is the construction of a log cabin. That's right, the log cabin, that concept, comes from the Swedish colonization of America. New Netherland, despite not being happy about New Sweden, appears to tolerate them despite the angry letter, and it's likely because the English are encroaching more heavily from the north at the time. So New Netherland is not happy about the situation, but the English threat is far greater, so they're putting their effort more into dealing with that. That encroachment is also in part due to the growth and the fracturing of New England. And that's where we're going to leave off our middle colonization series with the creation of New Sweden. And the growth and fracturing of New England is going to be our next series that we'll talk about more next time on Historical Context.